Freemasonry and its Ancient Mystic Rites is Charles W. Leadbeater's absorbing, in-depth study of Freemasonry and the mystery schools of ancient Egypt, Greece, and Judea, and Europe in the Middle Ages, up to the emergence of co-masonry in the 20th century. During his lifetime, Leadbeater used his rare capacity for clairvoyance, or seeing beyond the physical plane, for many purposes. He observed and recorded the subatomic structure of a number of elements before science had the capacity to determine such things. He described the forms and colors created as a result of our thoughts, and the shapes and colors of the human subtle body. Drawing on these abilities as well as on historical records, Leadbeater relates in this book fascinating, previously unknown facts about the mystery schools and their practices and beliefs. His observations and reflections point up many similarities among these schools, in spite of distance and time, a common mystery bond running through otherwise disparate cultures. As Leadbeater shows, these ancient rites have emerged in this century as Freemasonry. About the author. Charles W. Leadbeater, 1847 through 1934, was among the clergy of the Church of England as a young man. He became a theosophist in 1883 and went to India to help Helen P. Blavatsky, the spiritual head of the movement. In India, he also worked with Colonel H.S. Olcott, president of the Theosophical Society, in revitalizing Buddhism in Southeast Asia and in founding Buddhist schools. His clairvoyant powers were opened while he was in India, and he became a teacher and lecturer for the society. He is well known for the meticulous care he took in observing and reporting on superphysical phenomena. Leadbeater is author of many books on theosophy and on his clairvoyant investigations, including Man, Visible and Invisible, and the Chakras, and he co-authored books such as Thought Forms with Annie Besant, who was president of the society after Colonel Olcott's death. Leadbeater was a 33rd degree Mason, and, in addition to this book, wrote The Hidden Side of Freemasonry. Author's Preface. When I wrote The Hidden Life in Freemasonry, it was at first my intention to devote my second chapter to a brief outline of Masonic history. I soon found that that plan was impractical. The most compressed account that would be of any use would occupy far more space than I could spare, and would entirely overweight the book with what is, after all, only one department of its subject. The obvious alternative is to publish the historical sketch separately. Hence this book, which is really but a second volume of the other. The keynote of both volumes, and indeed the only reason for their publication, is to explain precisely what the title indicates: The Hidden Life in Freemasonry. The mighty force in the background, always at work, yet always out of sight, which has guided the transmission of the Masonic tradition through all the vicissitudes of its stormy history, and still inspires the utmost enthusiasm and devotion among the brethren of the craft today. The existence of the work. The existence and the work of the head of all true Freemasons is the one and sufficient reason for the virility and power of this most wonderful organization. If we understand his relation to it, and what he wishes to make of it, we shall also understand that it embodies one of the finest schemes ever invented for the helping of the world and for the outpouring of spiritual force. Many of our brethren have been for many years unconsciously taking part in this magnificent altruistic work. If they can be brought to comprehend what it is they are doing and why, they will continue the great work more happily and more intelligently, throwing into it the whole strength of their nature, both bodily and spiritual, and enjoying the fruit of their labors far more definitely than ever before. Chapter 1. Schools of Masonic Thought. A history of Freemasonry would be a colossal undertaking, needing encyclopedic knowledge and many years of research. I have no pretension to the possession of the qualities and the erudition required for the production of such a work. All I can hope to do is throw a little light upon some of the dark spots in that history, and to bridge over to some extent some of the more obvious gaps between the sections of it which are already well known. The origins of Masonry. The actual origins of Masonry, as I have said in a previous book, are lost in the mists of antiquity. Masonic writers of the 18th century speculated uncritically upon its history, basing their views upon a literal belief in the history and chronology of the Old Testament, and upon the curious legends of the craft handed down from operative times in the old charges. Thus, it was put forward in all seriousness by Dr. Anderson in his first book of Constitutions that Adam, our first parent, created after the image of God, the great architect of the universe, must have had the liberal sciences, particularly geometry, written on his heart, while others, less fanciful, have attributed its origin to Abraham, Moses, or Solomon. Dr. Oliver, writing as late as the first part of the 19th century, held that Masonry, as we have it today, is the only true relic of the faith of the patriarchs before the flood, while the ancient mysteries of Egypt and other countries, which so closely resembled it, were but human corruptions of the one primitive and pure tradition. As scientific and historical knowledge progressed in other fields of research, and especially in the criticism of the scriptures, scientific methods were gradually applied to the study of Masonry, so that today there exists a vast body of fairly accurate and most interesting information upon the history of the craft. In consequence of this and other lines of investigation, there are four main schools or tendencies of Masonic thought, not in any way necessarily defined or organized as schools, but grouped according to their relation to four important departments of knowledge lying primarily outside the Masonic field. Each has its own characteristic approach towards Freemasonry. Each has its own canons of interpretation of Masonic symbols and ceremonies, although it is clear that many modern writers are influenced by more than one school.